Thank you so much for everyone who's listening in and who's joining us now. Very special guest. I really hope I say this name right. Niklas as Anzinger.
That's good. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. You're originally from Germany, but right now you're working out of your project in Honduras. It's called Prospera. So, like, let's just start simple. Why don't you tell me about yourself,
Yeah.
Prospera, and how this project came to be?
Yeah. Yeah. To be precise, so I'm not working directly with Prospera, but I'm an advisor, but I do a project called Vitalia that is embedded in Prospera, right? So Prospera is building a futuristic city with the legal rights of a special economic zone in the country of Honduras on an island called Roatán, right? So it's not what many people associate with mainland Honduras. Roatán is a paradise island that has direct flights, an international airport, and it's about the size of Hong Kong. It has a population of about 100,000 people. And Prosperous building has a couple of buildings there, has a resort, has a large tower, and has really cool stuff there, like a circular factory where robots make building materials. We're going to have drone delivery at the next pop-up city and things like that. And with Vitalia, we're building a district that's focused on biotechnology and longevity there, right? So it came originally out of Suzalu, right? That's when much of the ideas and the framework for what we're building started. So it's a very crypto-heavy community, and our goal is to bring entrepreneurs, founders, and scientists there who are helping us develop life-saving technologies and bring new drugs and therapies to markets much faster than they could anywhere else, enabled by the better legal and regulatory framework.
All right, so you brought up that, so maybe let's skip ahead and continue this conversation with the biotech and all that. And plus, I watched a video of you maybe a couple hours ago, you talking about this. Uh, you know, I believe the number you said was around 83% faster to market, which is an amazing. And when you think about it, it's not just like with the PlayStation, Sony sooner to market means they make a few extra bucks. And of course, the pharmaceutical company will make a few extra bucks as well when they get to fewer when it gets to market sooner. But you could be talking about a few thousand minimum lives saved with numbers like that. So it's more than just
Yeah.
the bottom line. So
Yeah.
how did this special economic zone come
Yeah.
to that number? How do you get to that number?
Sure. And to for anyone that so to say a bit more about how the system currently works. So if you want to bring a new drug or therapy to market, you have to get approval from a health authority. In the United States, that's famously the US Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, and other countries treat pre-market approval quite similar, right? So you're not allowed to sell drugs or treatments to patients unless they're explicitly approved. And then there's a whole process for approval, which is done via what's called clinical trials. So there's 4 phases of clinical trials to test for the safety and efficacy of new drugs. And there's a whole process before as well, which includes things like animal testing and drug discovery, right? So the clinical trial process alone takes 10 to 15 years.
Wow.
And there's often lots of time that's going on before. Now, that seems like a very long time, and it is a very long time, but it's just how things work. And once you clear that, you have access to the market of almost the entire world. If you're in the United States, then you have access to the largest market in the world, the United States, which is 50% of all spending on pharma, which is great, right? Because when you're at that stage, your drug and the IP around it is typically valued at several hundreds of millions or billions, just because you have that enormous access, right? So that's the way the current system works. And then was it always like that? No, it wasn't, right? So for example, before 1962, things were really different. Before 1962, the FDA did not have the authority for pre-market approval when it comes to efficacy. It was just in charge of safety, right? And during that time, the requirements or um, the additional testing for efficacy was introduced, and that's when we got to these long timelines. Before 1962, the FDA had amended by Congress it could actually not take longer than 6 months to approve a new drug. Otherwise, you could just go to market directly. And things weren't like medical anarchy back then. Things actually worked out quite well. People often say the 1930s to the 1970s were a golden age of medical innovation, right? So much of that slowdown is really unnecessary. It could be done differently. It could be done faster. And I think an peek into how it could be different was during the COVID pandemic, right? So it just shows you how much is possible by the fact that the first vaccine by Moderna was developed over the course of
Wow.
one weekend, mostly on a computer based on the genome sequence, right? We're living in an age where we can do things with the science and technology we have that are indistinguishable from magic, right? You know, we have decoded the human genome and we can edit it and mold it to many ways that we want to. But then it took 1 year for that vaccine or the first vaccine or the first cohort of vaccines to be approved. And that was an exception, right? Usually it takes 10 years, right? So we called that Operation Warp Speed. And, you know, we showed that it can work. So why are we not do that for other things that kill people, like Alzheimer's and different forms of cancer and the idea that aging is itself a disease? Why do we not have the same kind of urgency, right? And it could be possible, right? We just need to have a different way we approach several of the legal and ethical questions around how we do things, and that's what we're doing with Vitalia.
And I guess I just have a follow up to that because, you know, when the vaccine was rolled around, there was a lot of skepticism and outright refusals to take it. And the main argument was like the pandemic was very young, and all of a sudden, ta-da! This vaccine was made. So while there's some legal loop, like I know there's legal red tape that you're going to hopefully resolve with this, but how do you resolve the mental sort of red tape that a lot of these people have when something is so quick to market?
Yeah, I think no single vaccine proposal against their words. Very important thing to say. The other thing is, for young. So, um, and I also would say that there could have been a cluster of lots of different vaccines. There could have been more iterations to improve them, right? In fact, if you had just changed the genome sequence of the first vaccine to the subsequent variant of the virus, sort of from Delta to Omicron or whatever, each of those the vaccine could have been made much more effective, right? But it at least instead got less effective over time because that wasn't done. And why wasn't it done? Because would have to go through approval again, right? So um, I think the process got us vaccines that work, at least for, again, the risk profile for an older population. But also that could have been done much better. And just from an ethical point of view, I think nobody should be forced to take it, especially when you're young. It was probably not the worst idea to not take it, right? Because there were sort of side effects and there's no long-term studies and things like that, right? So, we want better data on long-term effects of things. And what I'm proposing with the alternative system is that we get even better data.
That's really fascinating. Now, like these are all, pros to doing this, but I can't imagine you just thought of this and then, by the end of the week things were going great for you. So like what are some of the challenges that you faced when you were building this company and working with, the people in Honduras and the governments and such?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots to talk about. There's definitely not a lack of challenges. So just when I started, which was in April 2022, I didn't start Vitalia then. I started a VC fund and I started living in Prospera. That was just when Honduras elected a new government. So it switched from a government that was broadly supportive of the zones, or at least didn't care, was very negative. And that was accompanied by a very strong defamation campaign against the zones. Um, but I was there on the ground with everyone involved, who's been many of the people, especially in the Honduran side, they've been fighting for this for more than 10 years. And I decided to take a bet. Hey, it can work. We have a strong legal argument. We have a strong moral argument. We should exist, and um, we're going to fight for it. So fast forward. I think the situation looks much better now than 2.5 years ago. We recently had the challenge with the Supreme Court ruling, so that temporarily made things look not that good.
Ooh,
I think that has improved since. We're not out of the waters until we have a new government in place in Honduras. There's a very good chance we're going to get a new government. And if it comes to that, there's another very good chance that we'll get our rights granted and reinstated and secured. In which case, I think this will be a very shining example of a very positive change for the country within Honduras, and also a good example for the rest of the world. And that is a constant challenge, sort of that political and legal battle situation. Another very big challenge is just Honduras doesn't have a very good brand, right? So convincing people um, from that are not from Honduras, that are at the top of their game in like biotech or crypto, to come here is a very big challenge. I think we're increasingly able to make Honduras into a better brand, and also from within the country of Honduras, that it's just not something that people are used to, that things can actually improve or work out in their country. So, and because of the political exposure, there's often hesitation. But I also have seen over time, over the last couple of years, that these things are really solid legal situation, then things can really accelerate, and it can really make a very big impact for many Hondurans in the country.
yeah, like I have to admit, I with the brand thing, it's not something that I thought about recently, and even when I looked into this, so you think El Salvador, you think Argentina in terms of like the Latin America crypto crowd. Um, but so I can understand your brand, but I also feel your hope with the changing of the government is something that's relatable in Canada and the United States and many places all over the world. Our country has been in the news this past few days for the not so great reasons. Uh, we may have I wouldn't exactly call our laws crypto friendly, to be honest. We may have a change of government, and we're hoping that changes. So the whole sort of treading waters in a not so friendly governmental environment, shifting with hope towards a friendly one is something that we can relate to. Uh, but so why don't you tell us more about the government? Like, why do you think it's going to change, and how will that help you out?
Yeah, I mean, the current government, headed by a socialist administration under Xiomara Castro, is highly unpopular, right? So they messed a lot of things up, and there were videotapes where they've been caught with narco trafficking, right? So, which is also something that the previous government did, right? So, Honduras is often known as a narco state. So, there's a lot of corruption and a lot of influence on the side of the drug cartels. So, and people are fed up with that. And there are, and that what the polls indicate is that the current government is highly unpopular. And we're in a smaller country, so there is a let's say a bigger ability that we can influence things, right? So we are on the radar, right? We have brought hundreds of millions in investments, and we have been able to kind of exert our influence and talk to some of the candidates who have very good chances of becoming the next presidents of Honduras and the ruling party in the next government administration, and can make sort of our wishes heard. And there's broadly an agreement that we should exist, and that we should continue what we're doing now, if we're able to get a change in administration and the government in Honduras.
That's great, and I hope that happens for you. Like I've witnessed other Latin countries, making that shift. We try to remain non-political here, so I won't get into the politics side of it. But I will like you look at what happens in Argentina. Uh, they did like such a dramatic transformation, and I don't think if the government hadn't changed, I don't think crecimiento or muy buenos would have happened there. Um, I, and so I really hope it all works out for you. So let's talk about your experience like working in Prospera, just like not so much government, but just working there. What is it like to work there compared to like where you've worked in
Yeah,
other places?
yeah. I mean, um, So I think people really underestimate or aren't aware, or when they hear Honduras, have an association that's like not have reliable Amazon deliveries, for example, or like not a diversity of culture or entertainment options as like big cities around the world. But it is a high as very speaking. And then the
Sorry,
Prospera
you
jurisdiction
cut out
itself
for a
is just
bit.
a
Do you mind starting over? Because like we missed most of what you just said.
stir. So, um, Roatán or being in Prospera, it's a very attractive destination. Right? It's in early Hawaii, right? It's a paradise island. It has tropical weather. It has some of the best scuba diving in the world. It has Jurassic Park-like nature and tropical jungle. It has like animal sanctuaries, and it is increasingly becoming a very popular tourist destination. It has nightlife, it has bars, it has restaurants, and it has in many ways first world amenities, not in all aspects, right? So, but it has, very good Wi-Fi. And within the Prosper jurisdiction, it's just a honeypot for very ambitious people, for people that are in technology, that are doing crypto, that are building software, that are scientists, that are in biotech, that, medical practitioners that treat people. So it's very diverse, very international, with a very strong Honduran component, and a strong American component. So it's kind of a mix of international, Honduran, and American. So you'd feel at home there if you're from Honduras. You'd feel at home there if you're international and if you're into technology.
That's really cool. I did hear parts of the stuff where you're like you can't like expect Amazon or stuff deliveries or stuff like that. Um, and I get what you're saying. There are some things that you just have to tell yourself that you're not in, the first world when you experience something that's not great. For example, like when I was in a cheap hotel in Colombia, I woke up and I don't know what bug it was, but there were like 100 of them on my floor, right?
Mhm.
And I know that if this type of thing happened in Toronto, I'd be demanding a refund. I have new rooms. They would be like giving me amenities to make up for it. And what did I do in Colombia? I put on my shoes and started, opened the door and started to kick them out of the room. Because I knew full well had I went to the front desk, they'd be like, "It's the world. There are bugs. What do you want us to do about it? Maybe we can get you a broom to make your job a little bit easier." Or, you know. Um,
Yeah. I mean, in many ways, I sometimes experience also the opposite. Sometimes in Latin America and sometimes in Asian countries, right? So if you pay lots of money for your hotel room, and if the Wi-Fi doesn't work or whatever, there's nothing you get versus in other places you get like highly attentive customer service, and you pay much
oh
less
yeah,
amount
that
of
is
money.
true. There are times where you spend no money and you get the 5-star, $1,000 a night service that you would have to pay to get here, even though you paid hardly anything. But I just tell people when they go, like, just, you're not in Europe when you go to these things, and just be a little bit more understanding, and mostly because they won't care if you complain. Uh,
Yeah, it's like some things are better, some
yeah,
things are worse.
and
Like,
how
it's
is
not
the
the same.
internet there? Okay,
Very, very good. And we have Starlink there,
because like
right? So we have
I
lots
know
of
it's
Starlink as
improving, but I
backups. Yeah.
just remember my first experience in Latin America. Uh, like stuff like Netflix, like not an option. And one because I worked there, and when someone had a Skype meeting, Zoom did not exist. Uh, Everyone had to log off the internet because, and you had to like book the Skype meeting, like if it was an actual room, because the internet was barely strong enough to do a Skype call. And so you're like,
Yeah, that's not the case anymore. I mean, the internet that we have in Roatan, or at least in our place in our jurisdiction, I was just traveling San Francisco and Washington D.C., and the internet
yeah,
really
like
works
to be
there.
honest, I'm not as surprised. Like, if we were having this conversation 10 years ago, I'd be like, really? But I'm definitely not as surprised as they were. I just feel like I have to do the
Yeah, yeah,
obligatory "How's the internet?" question for people that, especially for tech people. So like, I'm here working in Canada. I work from home. I sometimes go to these pop-up cities. Uh, I have my own reasons for why I would encourage you to go to these things. I loved my experience in Buenos Aires. I loved growing my network. I still talk to these people, and I feel like I've made friends for life. But so what are some other reasons that you feel you should tell people to go to this event rather than working at their
yeah.
home office?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, speaking about Vitalia, of course, so we're gonna have another pop-up city starting January 6th. It's for 2 months, and then another 1 month builder residency. Um, there's what makes this one different is we're building a permanent district, right? So the pop-up city part is open to visitors who want to spend limited amounts of time there, who want to be part of the community, make friends, find business opportunities there, that they can realize elsewhere. Um, and we see that many Italians do groups in other places, so in Lisbon and San Francisco or in London, that they meet up there as well and spend a couple of weeks during the year in Vitalia. And then others move here permanently, right? And you meet some of the same people again, and some of them have started businesses and they're working on things, right? So that is what makes Vitalia special, right? So we have a group of people there that is committed to be here very long term. It is a serious development effort in a developing country, right? So lots of my staff and from my team are Honduran, and we determined to make this something big and something lasting, so you can come back each time and see that there's more than more things than last time. And other than that, what is the same as other pop-up cities, or we follow the Zalu template, where we have lots of educational opportunities for some of these frontier tech areas, right? So we have theme week for longevity biotech, for crypto cities, and for human enhancement. We even have an academic program this time in the summer school, doing quantum biology, biology of aging, and economics of science. We have, and also we have much more space there to do kind of your own experimentation. We have a maker space, we have a lab, we have a primary care and ER clinic
Wow.
this time. And we're also going to have sort of a miniature, small initial version of a wet lab this time. So there's tons you can learn. This you can tinker, you can iterate, you can build stuff with people. The island itself is highly attractive. So last time we did like boat trips, animal sanctuary, scuba diving, snorkeling, lots of stuff. So it's a really an epic experience. And as you know from pop-up cities, you make
Yeah.
friends there
Are
for
you
life.
saying it's going to be a difficult time to convince Canadians and to go to the tropics in January?
Uh, I mean, you like the cold?
Yeah, that's like that ER thing in that workshop. That's because I'm not medical, so that's not something that I would even think of. But that just sounds so cool and so amazing. And I have people that do work in that field, and I'm gonna get off this call and immediately send them this information and tell them to apply. I didn't even originally think they could be something that would be interested in this before this, and I think that's really cool. Um, but I also find it like the event weeks are really crucial, and I'll just briefly talk about my experience. So my first week there, they had kind of one of those, okay, like we're having a huge event week. Like obviously, be here for 6 weeks, but the first week is to just welcome to Buenos Aires type thing. And I don't think I spent any money my first week there. It was sort of like
Mhm.
Arbitrum was having an event, uh, Chainlink having an event. I don't know if these big companies are correct, so don't hold me to that. Uh, but various crypto companies were hosting these events at various restaurants. So I was trying Argentinian cuisine. I was trying their drinks, and I think my bill for the night was I tipped the waitress a couple dollars because everything else was covered. And it was just alone for that, I encourage people to go to these events. If you can't afford to do it the whole stay, try to head out for those weeks because it's an invaluable experience. But as there is the case with going to a new country, Like, uh, is there any like legal requirements people should know? For example, I knew people that couldn't end up going to Muy Buenos because they couldn't get their visa approved. They were stuck in Bolivia or another neighboring, or I think Uruguay, because they literally couldn't get into the country. Like, so is there something they should do to before they book their ticket and apply?
Yeah. For most people, it's not that big of a challenge to come to Honduras, right? Also because Roatán is a popular tourist destination. Um, you need to get visas from certain countries. So I know if you're from, like, you have a passport from China or from India, you need a visa from most African countries, unfortunately, and also recently, unfortunately, from the
Oof.
UK. So, but I think from Canada and the United States and most Latin American countries, it shouldn't be a problem at all. For most European countries, it's not a
Do
problem at all.
they like what's the time limit on that? Because I used to live in Argentina before that, and I won't get into details about the specifics of my visa, but I did have to do the thing called border hopping, where I would have to
Uh,
spend a day in Uruguay. I visited the falls in Iguazu for
yeah,
a
yeah.
day. Um, do if it
Yeah, I mean that's so you just go to do an appointment to extend your visa there in Honduras. So you have to have like kind of an annoying bureaucracy visit. Sometimes there's like a waiting line or you have to be in a waiting room for a few hours, but that's
okay,
it.
that seems to be easier than what I had to do and cheaper.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But that's good to know because some like these bureaucratic stuff you have to get them out of the way. Um, and you had some special guests. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. So, last time we were able to bring very well-known guests. Naval Ravikant was here. Balaji Srinivasan came here in person. Brian Johnson, who took also the gene therapy here. There were big, well-known venture capitalists as well, such as Dave McClure and some of the best bioscientists in the world. Aubrey de Grey, for example. We're making a bit of a habit to not announce these names beforehand for their privacy's sake, right? But we can also expect more people of that kind of name or caliber to come to the next pop-up city, right? So because it's just is something that is sparking curiosity, right? Because hey, we're building a whole new city, right? It's That's just something that's very attractive and lots of people that are very welcoming of the kind of things that we stand for, right? So much of the crypto, the deregulation, the network states, let's do something different. Much of the ideas that come from the tech world, right? So where we can push the frontiers. Lots of people that have some of the same ideas are very attracted to come here and explore this with us.
That's really cool. Like, um, I gotta be honest, we had some like I don't know some wellish known people, but when I went to Muy Buenos, but nothing of that caliber. So to attract those people would be I can't imagine be quite a coup for you. So like congratulations to
Yeah,
that. And I'm not gonna ask you to name any future stuff for the reasons you already said with the privacy, but I wish you with the best of luck with those future guests as well. Um, s-
yeah, yeah.
so like okay, what are some things let's go to the annoying but necessary details. Like what are some things we need to do to set up to go to sign up for this thing? Is it like all are welcome? Do we
Yeah, just
apply? Is there a form?
yeah. So you go to Vitalia.city and you can very easily find the whole program there, the application form. There's also a form where you can apply for grants, right? So, to make it easier, depending on what position you're in, if you're, like a startup founder and, on a budget or something like that. So there's a variety of options. You can also help and make contributions as a volunteer to reduce some of the costs or effort. And uh, who we approve is people who just have alignment with many of the ideas we stand for. Ideally, someone in our community can vouch for you. So ideally, share a social media profile like on LinkedIn or Twitter or something like that, where we see that some people we know are connected with you, right? So just so we can do a quick check. Hey, are these people cool? Are they legit? Right? So things like that. And we're of course highly biased in favor of founders, of scientists, of explorers. The common theme is techno optimism. So we believe in the idea that technology and science are making the world a better place. We could even make death optional and make longevity a reality.
Okay, that's really like okay, good to know. So like I said, there's some people that I didn't even think about. I'm gonna share with them and encourage them to apply to this thing.
Mhm.
Samir, he just raised his question, so let's give him a time to
Yeah.
talk about this. How's it going, Samir?
Yo, what's up? Can you guys hear me?
Perfectly. How's the haircut looking?
And I'm looking fresh AF, man. I'm just like freaking fresh as fuck. Anyways, Nick,
Good
yeah, the
haircut.
new haircut, man. Nicholas, it's so great to have you on the show, and it's so funny how we spoken two years ago.
Samir, are you saying something? I'm
Yeah,
not hearing
I'm
Yeah,
anything.
hearing
can you guys
him.
hear me?
I'm hearing him.
Nicholas, can you hear me? Fuck. Okay,
Okay,
let me
weird. I'm
reconnect.
not
I'll
hearing it.
I'll, I'll come back again.
Okay, he's just gonna exit and come back, and we'll uh, we'll give him a minute. But yeah, if there's anybody else that wants to speak up, do you mind if they ask you any questions?
But now,
Okay,
Sure,
can
go
you hear
ahead.
Samir?
Nicholas, hello.
I don't hear
Does
Samir. Nope.
somebody else
Okay, all right,
does
Matthew.
somebody else
I'm
mind
just
you?
gonna shut up then.
Yeah, does somebody else
Yeah,
mind coming on just to say a couple words
it's
to see
okay.
if it's just Samir or if it's a space problem?
Hey guys,
Hey,
can you
Kaz.
hear me?
Nicholas, can you hear Kaz?
Okay, Matthew,
Cause
then I
I didn't
suggest
hear
just
anyone
let's
but
not
you.
break the flow. Just keep interviewing them, please.
Oh no, I hear someone. I need to hear the
Hey,
person who
Nicholas,
just
can you hear
spoke.
me?
Okay, there we
Yeah, I
go.
can
All
hear you.
right, awesome.
There you go.
So
Yeah,
first of
yeah.
all, it's great to have you here. It's great that we've talked about network space 2 years ago, and it's so crazy to see how far you've gone with that. Uh,
Yeah, you were one of the first people to interview
I
me.
know it's like wow, like I am just so proud to have this connection with you. Again, thanks so
Yeah.
much for being on Toronto DAO Spaces. I'm a huge nerd. Like, I'm obsessed with like, everything that Balaji posts and like Naval posts, and I'm sure a lot of like millions of people are the same way. But like the fact that you guys are so close, like they went to visit you guys and all of that. So my question is just like on the personal level, what is it like to like, I guess interact with Balaji like off camera? Or Naval for that reason, because I would be so intimidated because those are just giants, smart people, and there's like their ideas are just like crazy.
Yeah.
Like, what was it like for you? That's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, when you start out, it's the same with me, you'd be intimidated. So I was intimidated too. But then you just get used to it. You see that they're normal people, and you kind of learn that there is a certain kind of attire and how you manage or build relationships like that. And the best one is, that you chill, that you're a normal person, that you're helpful, and things like that. And they're really cool people. Like, really highly enjoy hanging out with both of them. Balaji is like he is on podcasts. Like he gives like long lectures and
Right.
uh, he cares a lot, right? So he's really really helpful to individual founders. Like he's really trying to help you, give you advice that you need to succeed as a business. He really takes time to help founders. And Naval is a great conversationer. He's brought a lot of people. He is yeah, very thoughtful about what he's saying, right? And he is very social actually. So he's actually interacting with lots of people when he's there. I really, really liked his brother Kamal, who's just an awesome individual. So yeah, he has this enormous amount of sort of presence and of like meditative calmness about the world and openness. So really, really great group of people that came.
That's amazing. And yeah, like his brother, that he does look like a superhuman too. He's like all about that meditation and health, and
He
he's
looks like a character from
yeah,
Tekken,
yeah,
right?
yeah. He's like ripped. But like that's awesome, man. Like I am so excited for you. Like this is such a cool trip you're on right now, like in life, and I'm just happy to be on the sidelines looking into and cheering for you, brother.
Mhm. Sure. I mean, check it out on the front lights.
Of course, we'll do our best. And Matthew, I'm gonna pass it on to you. But again, Nicholas, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. Thank you, Sabir, for joining in. That was a great question. I have to admit, like I'm glad you asked that. I'm not as familiar with them, so I was glad that you were able to sort of get him to follow up with that information. Um, but
If not for Balaji Matthew, I would never be in crypto professionally speaking. Like he is the one who like really
Mhm.
pushed me to that whole field, like being actually in it rather than just on the sidelines. So like Balaji Srinivasan and his podcast and interviews and all that, that's what kind of put fire under my ass for all that.
wow, that's really cool. Because I don't I've been in a while. I don't think I can point to an individual that put me into crypto. That's so I didn't know that about you. I guess you learn something every day. And if you do, hopefully he can introduce you.
We'll see. We'll see.
But yeah, so like we're tech based company, but to be honest, Toronto DAO does have a huge crypto ish. Well, it's our base, right? We all have a background in crypto. So like, what are some of the crypto aspects to this project?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so we were kind of born out of crypto, right? Out of Suzalu, out of many of the ideas by Vitalik and also by Balaji. Um, and I give a couple of talks about this new idea of crypto cities, and I'm kind of describing something new or narrative there. Um, and what's how it's distinct or how Vitalia is a crypto city is um, so first of all, my starting point is just it's just better than TradFi, right? So in the process of building a new city, like financing things and like doing payments, paying taxes and things like that, crypto is just better, right? So for example, I bought an apartment with a loan that I took out from
Wow.
Aave, right, through a liquidity pool without an intermediary, and I did like a mortgage contract with my own holding company, so I'm self-mortgaging myself without a bank. And that's I wouldn't get a loan in Honduras for things like that, right? And I wouldn't get a loan from a German or from a US company for something like that, or that would be exceedingly hard. And this way I get a loan without an intermediary, where I take the own risk, which is just like fascinating. So just the fact that you can make legal contracts like that and that your counterparty is also into crypto, that is making an enormous difference, like especially the legal contract side. So many of the things that we want to do in crypto, like real world assets and have like land titles and real estate on chain and things like that, what's missing in most jurisdictions, or it's not like possible in places like Canada, is writing the right legal contracts for it, right? Because you're like regulated by the SEC or by one of the numerous like three-letter agencies. You would have to go through like the hoops of certain approvals and things like that. And here it's just freedom of contract, and the property title registry in Prospera is like fully digital, so you could like API integrate with it and just have much of the transactions that happen on chain that represent things in the real world. So this is, I think, where crypto cities come in and where we can do really things here that are not possible or way too slow in any other place in the world, right? So crypto cities is more real world assets. It is use cases like mortgaging, like financing of infrastructure and construction, of science and funding science and things like that, and of companies. It is less sort of meme coins. It is less sort of NFTs or art and things like that. And but it is much of the real world stuff.
Yeah, real world assets. That's taking like that seems to be taking center stage. I've thought that it took too long to take center stage. I always, for the last few years, been like, I really think this is what takes the whole blockchain space like into the nether sphere, and I don't know why no one's talking about it. So I'm glad that you're a part of that main stage conversation. Uh, and is so we're like a DAO, right? And we have NFTs,
Mhm.
but as like memberships. And the reason why we do this is we're yes, there's the core team that's sort of leading things, but eventually we want to give all of our members a say in this. And if we had a bajillion dollars, we don't. Then I would want like co-working space, all that stuff, and I'd imagine all our members get a say on how that runs. Is there any decentralized aspect to what you're doing? Do members will they ever get a say in the direction that this goes?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things to be said about this. I think, allowing people to vote does not make things
No.
decentralized. And it's also not necessarily something new and innovative, right? So I really think DAOs have a very poor track record when it comes to governance innovation, sorry to say, right? So there's been for all history several forms of organization that exist that you can use for what you're trying to do, right? So there have been co-ops, there have been coffee clubs, there have been all sorts of forms of corporations that can do all sorts of form of governance, sort of more democratic, more sort of one share or one token, one vote, or one person, one vote. So this is a variety of these governance mechanisms that are really, that I think you really should select based on what you're trying to achieve, right? So for many things, it just doesn't help you if you let people vote on things, especially if you're like a small startup, right? When you're in a small startup, you need to move fast and you need to have highly aligned, focused teams, right? So having voting process and governance there at that early stage is not a good idea and it's detrimental to what you're trying to achieve. Versus there's many areas where you benefit from having from people having an outcome in the collective, the success of the collective. For example, I think what has promise is patient-led DAOs, right? So where patients participate in like trials, help each other, and can participate or have an upside in the outcome. And there's several other forms of governance where it makes much more sense that everyone sort of has the same vote for certain mechanisms or whatever, right? So I would say when it comes to our ecosystem, Prospera itself has governance is its product, right? And the idea is that's a much more permissive, a much more libertarian, a much more freedom of contract system than you can have anywhere else. You have things like regulatory flexibility, the flexibility to form any kind of organization, like from a union to a DAO to like a normal centralized company. And that I think flexibility is what Prospera's governance is unlocking. And then how it's actually run, there's a form of things that are more centralized and some things that are more decentralized, right? So if you listen to Balaji's talks, right, some things just make more sense to have centralized. Like when you need to make decisions, for example, in diplomacy or politics, right? So these require a lot of context, and sometimes that context can't be public, right? Because you're kind of revealing critical information to a counterpart that they could use against you. So in those kind of situations, you need to have more centralized decision making, right? So there's not like a one size fits all, and like voting on things is necessarily the best way of governance, or the best way, or decentralization is necessarily the only way of everything.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought like a true DAO doesn't exist, and that's including us, and that's just something we're working on. But you're right. There's not you can't just have everything voted on. Just imagine if instead of our government, the Canadian government, instead of like having a prime minister, we have every single thing goes to a referendum, right? Nothing. Our
Mhm.
Canada would still. I don't even know if we'd have electricity. Like it would just be take forever to run things.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it's nice to get some people involved. And what does that look like? Does voting really do anything? These are all questions that all DAOs, all organizations that want to look at decentralization, including us, have to look at. So I think that's a really cool insight. Um, is there we're coming up to like the last 10 minutes. So like is there anybody that haven't has any questions they'd like to ask him before we log off? If that's okay with you, Nicholas.
Sure.
Yeah, I have a question. So yeah, I'm from Toronto and kind of like a nomad. So I'm curious how like what you think on like let's say collective funding of like mortgages for like perhaps reducing copay or like basically like kind of what I'm seeing is like a lot of private insurance companies or private no not private hedge funds are buying up homes en masse. So one probably good way of like instead of putting this all into a currency, or let's say the amount of volume that goes into Bitcoin, and just like in the whole crypto market, like there's some emissions that can like make everyone's rent at least 5%. Like let's say in Toronto, it can reduce everyone's rent by like 5 or 10%, or at least make a good impact if like let's say people collectively owned houses and then they would basically rent at cost instead of like Airbnb to some other people, and like basically you have like the serfs paying for the mortgages of like the richer folks, and then that just like makes the cycle even worse, and eventually we'll get more. Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious what you think of that.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Like, do you want to have mortgages more, sort of like a
Yeah,
mortgage
I'm not
pool?
gonna lie, I'm kind of lost too.
So essentially, what private equities do, like they take money from other people and then they like lend it into the market. And part of their lending is buying a bunch of houses. And then basically you have a cash flow from those houses, but that cash flow is coming from the mortgages and rent that us people pay. And so what's happening is you have this trickle up economics from the renters towards the owners of these mortgages. And so if we kind of like invert that by having collectively funded mortgages that aren't owned by private entities but by people, then that might create some co-ownership of like these residential areas.
I'm not sure I have a strong opinion on that idea.
Yeah, I guess you're talking about like trying to build literally the cities for financing or something like that, if I understood correctly.
Yeah, owning the residential, because right now most Torontonians don't even own houses, or at least people living here. They're renting from other people. So like it's a pretty bad cycle that makes everyone poorer, or most people poorer.
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple things to say about having multiple goals, but um, I don't think you need to own the house you live in, right? So you invest or put money into things for consumption, for ownership, and for investment, right? So it doesn't always make sense to have the consumption and the investment object be the same thing, right? So you don't necessarily. So many places people think they want to own the house that they live in, right? You should decouple or see those things in these two different terms. And the other thing is the reason that housing is so hard to afford, especially in many of the big cities like Toronto and many other places, is there's a shortage of supply of new construction. Not because there's so many restrictions, like zoning restrictions and regulations and protected sites and things like that. This just makes it really expensive. Like if you want to build a new house in San Francisco, you need to go through a maze of permitting. That's just too little new construction. And that means the existing housing stock and the existing supply can command higher prices, while the demand is increasing because there's still lots of people wanting to move into these big cities, right? So that's the reason why things are so expensive, which is also something we want to do differently here, right? Simply by not having all these restrictions on construction and building, right? So, build high. Building high is good. It's creating density, and sort of allowing for more innovative methods of construction, sort of modular housing, and so robotic construction and things like that that make smaller houses much more affordable. So, and I think we know that works, right? Because there's places like Minnesota, Houston, and also Tokyo who've deregulated housing, and as a result have experienced the same, if not falling prices, even places like Tokyo.
Yeah, like Toronto, I think, yeah, I don't mean in terms of owning. I do agree that if we put this buying power, let's say collective funding, if we put that into building houses as opposed to buying up houses, that would obviously add a higher sell pressure or a supply pressure. Whereas, and so, yeah, like maybe something that more targets towards, in Toronto's case, you have a lot of garages or laneway areas. And I guess there is like the restriction of like whether you can do a laneway depending on how the plot is located. But ideally, like if we could collectively fund to like build these modular homes that take maybe a few weeks to build on top of these garages, that would we could probably build 1 million homes in like 5-10 years just in downtown Toronto.
I don't think that's applicable to what he's doing though, because he's in like a remote island, right? So I don't
Uh,
like like I mean that's Toronto, and I I don't know. I feel like the two are not applicable in this situation. I don't know if you could.
I mean, I think it's an important difference, right? So, unfortunately, you will discover that many of these things you can't do in these big cities like Toronto, right? Because like the legal systems and constraints are not allowing you to, right? So this is why I moved to a place like this and built something new from the ground up, right? To not repeat the same mistakes.
Yeah, that's I guess it's sort of like the equivalent of a blank canvas, right?
Yeah, a blank canvas, of course, starting with many of these things that we know work and changing in some areas that and again.
Yeah. And is there anybody else that just one last question before we all sign off? All right, this is really cool. We're gonna post the link in the comments in this chat for those that want to apply. Just one more thing: is it a separate application for like your city and the
No, if you just fill out the one application, you'll be guided to everything else you need to do, right? So there's another e-residency for Prospera you need, but through us, you can get much deeper through Vitalia and things like that. So just go on vitalia.city and apply there, and the rest will be sorted out.
Yeah, and so get on over that. We'll put that link in there. I encourage everyone who thinks that this is for them to apply. If you're just what's his name, Ladens, if you're digital nomad like him, I encourage you to try a new scene and get to know a lot of new people. You never know, you might find somebody who can help you with what you're doing. And like I said, I shouldn't have to convince you too hard to leave Canada in January. Yeah, thank you so much, Nicholas. This has been awesome. I'm always happy to hear about these new pop-up cities. I always can't wait to go to a next one, and we can't wait to hear about what you're doing. And congratulations on this new build.
Awesome. Thanks for
No
having me,
problem.
and hope to see some of you there.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Nicholas. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you,
Yeah,
man.
thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.